The bar smelled of engine grease, spilled beer, and desperation. The kind of place where men came to escape, sign bad contracts, or get shot over a game of cards. Jack, J.D. Dalton leaned back in his chair, boot resting on the table's edge, chewing a toothpick he'd long since stopped tasting. The air hummed with low conversation, the occasional bark of laughter, and the distant whir of docking clamps securing another ship to New Texas 3, the last station before deep space. Another round? Mike O'Connell, Irish-American smart guy and former Navy engineer, lifted his glass in question. Or are we pretending we've got better places to be? Jack grunted, watching as a trio of Soren warriors entered. They walked with the rigid discipline of career soldiers, their deep blue exoskeletal armor catching the dim light. Their kind rarely came here. The Dominion looked down on humans, calling them death-worlders, reckless primitives too stubborn to die. And yet, here they were, moving with the unmistakable purpose of men who needed something. Tyrone Big T. Washington, ex-ranger and the size of a bear, folded his arms. Either they lost a bet, or this is about to be interesting. Eli Thompson, the youngest of them, a pilot who lived for high-risk stupidity, leaned forward. I'll put 50 credits on they need us for something dumb. The tallest of the Soren warriors approached, his mandibles clicking in what was probably meant to be a polite greeting, but came off more like a warning. I seek those with no fear of death, he said in practiced English, his voice like stone grinding over metal. Jack didn't move. Buddy, you just described every idiot in this bar. Try harder. The Soren's mandibles flared slightly. He had expected awe, not indifference. The Dominion requires warriors. For a mission no Soren will accept. The highest payout ever offered. Mike took a slow sip of his drink. That's a mighty fine way to say suicide mission. The alien's eyes flicked between them, considering. It is dangerous. But you are human. You thrive where others perish. Tyrone exhaled. Here we go again. Jack sat up, finally giving the warrior his full attention. Define dangerous. The planet is a doomed world. Silence. That was not a phrase thrown around lightly. Even the Dominion had classifications for planets, so hostile that life on them was a calculated insult to biology itself. Jack drummed his fingers against the table. And no Dominion soldier will go. You will be paid accordingly. Eli grinned. Define accordingly. The Soren pressed something on his wrist, and a holographic display flickered to life above the table. The numbers were obscene. More than any of them had ever been offered. More than even bounty hunters made capturing war criminals. Jack exhaled. That's generational wealth. And yet, the alien said, not a single warrior has accepted. Tyrone snorted. Because they like being alive. Mike leaned forward. All right, what's the catch? The alien hesitated. First mistake. Hesitation meant there was more, something worse than just danger. Jack had spent enough time in war zones to recognize the look of a man trying to decide how much truth he could afford to share. Jack waited. Silence was a weapon, too. Finally, the Soren exhaled through his spiracles. No soldier has returned. No transmissions have been recovered. The only certainty is that those sent do not come back. Eli whistled. So what I'm hearing is, we're signing up for a camping trip where the last 100 campers didn't bother leaving Yelp reviews. Mike rubbed his temples. Tell me there's at least some intel. Another pause. Second mistake. Jack exhaled sharply. You have no idea what's down there. We have theories. The alien admitted. Hostile fauna. Environmental hazards beyond standard classification. Some believe a biological anomaly exists. Something that nullifies technology. Mike's expression darkened. Nullifies tech? As in no guns? No vehicles? No shields? It is the possibility. Tyrone shook his head. And here I thought my ex-wife was the scariest thing in the universe. Jack studied the Soren for a long moment. You don't need warriors. You need idiots crazy enough to fight something no one understands, on a planet where nothing makes sense, with weapons that might not work. The Soren inclined his head. You are human. It is what you do. Jack looked at the others. Mike looked at the payout again. For that much money, I can retire somewhere that doesn't smell like burnt engine oil. Tyrone cracked his knuckles. Guess we should see if Deathworlders really live up to the name. Eli grinned. What the hell? I've always wanted my obituary to be interesting. Jack turned back to the Soren. We'll need gear. Whatever high-tech junk you think might work, plus standard projectile weapons. If your fancy energy guns crap out, we're going to need old-fashioned firepower. The alien hesitated. Third mistake. Jack's voice dropped. You weren't planning on giving us real weapons, were you? Bringing human ballistics into Dominion operations is discouraged. Mike made a disgusted noise. Yeah, well, so is dying, and I plan on doing that way later. Jack folded his arms. No deal unless we're armed the way we need to be. A long silence. Then, finally, the Soren reached into a compartment on his armor and tossed a small data chip onto the table. Accept this contract and the requested weapons will be provided. You depart in 12 hours. Jack picked up the chip, rolling it between his fingers. He met the alien's gaze, and for a moment, he saw something behind those black, insect-like eyes, a quiet kind of relief. Because if the humans failed, there was no one left to send. Jack exhaled. Well, boys, looks like we're going to be legends or statistics. Mike raised his glass. Here's to hoping it's the fun one. Tyrone grinned. Either way, they're naming a bar after us. Eli cracked his knuckles. Let's go make some terrible decisions. Jack crushed the data chip between his fingers, activating the contract. The deal was made. The drop pod rattled like a tin can in a hurricane. Jack clenched his jaw, bracing against the metal restraints as the force of re-entry slammed into him. The pod stabilizers struggled against the planet's volatile atmosphere, and the heat outside surged past safety limits. Sparks burst from a nearby console. Well, this is going great, Mike grumbled over the comms. Anybody else feeling like we should have asked for a bonus? Eli, who had insisted on piloting the descent manually, let out an unhinged laugh. Bonus? Man, this right here is worth the price of admission. A warning klaxon blared, flashing red across the cockpit. Tyrone cursed. Something's wrong with the dampeners. We're coming in too damn hot. Love that for us, Mike muttered. Jack exhaled through his nose. Brace. The impact hit like a freight train. The pod slammed into the planet's surface, metal screaming as it skidded across jagged terrain. Restraints bit into flesh. Sparks rained. For a moment, the world was nothing but sound and chaos. Then, silence. Jack blinked, vision swimming. His head throbbed, ribs protested, but he was alive. That was the important part. Roll call, he ordered. Still breathing, Mike groaned. Pretty sure my spine is now a suggestion, though. Eli let out a whoop. Best landing I've ever done. That was not a landing, Tyrone snapped. That was a controlled disaster. Jack unlatched his harness and forced the door open. Immediately, the world outside greeted him with a slap of heat thick as oil. The air shimmered, distorted by the sheer radiation bleeding from the planet's surface. His HUD flickered warnings, toxic atmosphere detected, extreme temperature variance, unstable gravitational field. The landscape stretched before them like a nightmare, a fractured wasteland of blackened rock and jagged cliffs, with rivers of molten slag carving through the ground like open wounds. The sky churned, an ugly swirl of dark clouds split by violent streaks of green lightning. Well, Mike said, stepping out and surveying the hellscape before them. I hate it here. Feels like Arizona, Eli mused. Jack scanned the horizon. No sign of movement. No signs of life at all. That was almost worse. Comms checked, he ordered. Static. Mike frowned, tapping his earpiece. Not getting anything. If the relay's busted, we might be on our own for a while. Perfect, Tyrone muttered. Jack turned toward the remains of their drop pod. It was half buried in rock and debris, smoke curling from the engine. Their gear was intact, though, and that was something. He reached inside, pulling out a Mark 17 projectile rifle and slinging it over his shoulder. Arm up. We move fast, stay sharp, and assume this planet is trying to kill us at all times. Well, it is called a doom world, Eli pointed out. I'd be kind of disappointed if it wasn't. Tyrone handed Mike a rifle, then grabbed his own. So, what's the plan, boss? Jack checked his HUD again, trying to orient himself. Their mission was simple. In theory, retrieve the lost Dominion power core from an abandoned outpost 20 clicks east. The same outpost that had sent distress signals before going completely dark. We find the outpost, Jack said. Get eyes on whatever took out the last crew, and if it's something we can kill, we kill it. Love a clear objective, Mike said dryly. Eli adjusted his pack. Hey, if nobody came back last time, does that mean we get all their stuff? Focus, Jack said. They started moving. Every step on this planet felt wrong. The gravity wasn't consistent. One moment it pulled heavy, the next it lightened just enough to throw off their balance. The terrain shifted unpredictably, cracks splitting open and sealing just as fast. The heat was oppressive, a constant pressure against their suits. After an hour, the silence started to wear on them. Mike wiped sweat from his brow. Is it just me, or does this place feel too empty? Jack understood what he meant. No birds, no insects, not even the ambient hum of wind, just dead, suffocating quiet. Eli pulled out a protein bar. Maybe whatever wiped out the last guy's already left. Or maybe it's watching, Tyrone muttered. They pressed forward. By the time they reached a halfway point, the outpost's first structures came into view, or what was left of them. The perimeter fence had been torn apart, the metal warped and twisted like something had melted through it. The security towers lay in pieces, massive claw-like gouges raking across the steel. Okay, Eli said. So not abandoned. Jack crouched, scanning the area. His HUD flickered, struggling against interference. Something was messing with their systems. Mike knelt beside a mangled piece of armor, found one of the last guys. The remains weren't fresh. The body had been half dissolved. The edges of the exosuit corroded as if eaten away by acid. That's not normal, Tyrone muttered. Eli nudged the remains with his boot. On a scale of 1 to we should run now, how bad is this? Mike picked up a broken rifle, inspecting the damage. Bad. This thing didn't just fail. It was melted. Jack stood, tightening his grip on his weapon. Eyes up. We're not alone. The wind shifted. A sound echoed through the ruined structures. Not quite a growl, not quite static, something in between. Mike took a step back. Okay, hate that. The shadows moved. Then it hit. A shape blurred through the ruins with unnatural speed, too fast for their sensors to lock on. Tyrone fired first. The gun kicked, sending a burst of bullets, tearing into the moving mass. For a split second, they saw it. A nightmare of twisting limbs, obsidian black skin that shimmered like oil, teeth too many and too long. Then it wasn't there anymore. The ground split open beneath them. Jack barely had time to shout before the earth swallowed them whole. They tumbled through darkness, crashing into something wet and alive. Jack landed hard, the impact knocking the air from his lungs. His suit registered corrosive damage. He coughed, pushing himself up. Around him, fleshy walls pulsed and shifted, slick with something that burned on contact. Where the hell are we? Eli choked. Mike's breathing was ragged. I think we're inside something. Jack's gut turned cold. Tyrone aimed his rifle. So we're in the belly of the beast. Now, what? Jack checked his weapon. Now, he said, we find a way out before it digests us. The walls pulsed. Thick, vein membranes stretched around them, glistening with a sickly bioluminescence that cast the chamber in a deep, reddish glow. The air was humid, dense with a chemical stench that burned their lungs even through their suits. Jack wiped a thick, viscous fluid from his visor, forcing himself to ignore the unsettling sensation of it sliding over his glove. Mike groaned, rolling onto his side. "I just want to officially register my complaint about this mission." Tyrone pressed a hand to his ribs, testing for breaks. "Noted. Also, we're definitely inside something. My suit's registering organic surroundings." Eli prodded the ground with his knife. Instead of rock, his blade sank into something soft and the floor twitched. "So, stomach, lungs, or something worse." Jack scanned their surroundings. The structure wasn't uniform. Passages stretched in multiple directions, some pulsating as if breathing, others slick with bubbling pools of acidic bile. In the center of the chamber, massive black spines protruded from the walls like jagged ribs. The entire place felt alive. "We move now," Jack ordered. "Sitting here just means we're digesting slower." Mike got to his feet, wincing. "Love the optimism." Tyrone adjusted his rifle. "Weapons check. If this thing nullifies tech like they said, we might be down to bullets and knives." Eli flicked his flashlight on. It sputtered but held. Still working for now, they advanced cautiously, boots squelching against the fleshy ground. The tunnel walls reacted to their presence, contracting slightly as they passed, as if sensing them. Jack kept his rifle raised, scanning for movement. He didn't like this. Something wasn't right. This wasn't just some predator's stomach. It was too structured, too calculated. Then they heard it. A sound too deep, too vast, too wrong. A heartbeat. Jack stopped. The others followed suit, eyes darting. The sound reverberated through the chamber, slow, deliberate, powerful. It wasn't coming from their immediate surroundings. It was coming from below. "Tell me that's the wind," Mike whispered. "Would love to," Tyrone muttered. "But I'd be lying." Eli exhaled. "So, we're in something's body and it's definitely still alive. That's bad, right?" Jack took another step forward, then froze. The wall ahead of them opened, not like a door, like an eyelid. A massive, slit-pupiled eye unshuttered in front of them, its gelatinous surface reflecting their forms in grotesque distortion. The pupil contracted, focused, and a deep, rattling sound filled the air. It had seen them. The tunnels convulsed. The floor lurched violently, throwing them sideways. Walls slammed together, forcing them to dive forward as the passage collapsed behind them. "Run!" Jack barked. They sprinted. The tunnel twisted as if alive, rerouting itself in a grotesque act of conscious intent. The walls turned slick, secreting a viscous substance that burned through their boots. "The hell is this thing?" Mike shouted. "Something that doesn't want us leaving," Jack growled. The heartbeat quickened. Then, from the darkness ahead, it came. A towering monstrosity unfolded from the tunnel's depths, emerging like a shadow given form. It moved like liquid but struck like stone, limbs too long, skin too dark, shifting between solidity and mist. Its head was a jagged crown of bone and fangs, and its eyes, they weren't eyes. They were voids. It didn't roar. It spoke, not in words, not in language, but directly into their minds. "You are not of this place." Jack staggered back, the voice slamming into his skull like a sledgehammer. His vision fractured. Flashes of something vast, something ancient, seared into his mind. A planet not dead but dreaming, its surface merely a shell over something deeper. Something waiting. Eli clutched his head. What is that?" Tyrone gritted his teeth. "It's in my head. Get it out." Jack fought the nausea clawing at his gut. He focused, forcing the presence out, pushing back against the invading force in his mind. "Move!" They fired. Bullets ripped through the creature, but it barely reacted. Its form shimmered, distorting as if reality itself struggled to contain it. Then it lunged. Tyrone shoved Eli out of the way, taking the brunt of the impact. The creature's claws sheared through his armor like paper, sending him flying into the wall. He hit hard, coughing blood. Tyrone! Jack snarled. Mike emptied a magazine into the thing's side, but it was already moving again. Jack reacted on instinct. He grabbed the closest grenade from his belt, high-yield incendiary. He pulled the pin and shoved it straight into the creature's gaping chest. The explosion tore through the chamber. The creature screeched, its form unraveling as white-hot fire consumed it. The walls shrieked in response, as if the entire structure could feel its pain. The beast reeled back, but it wasn't dead. Not yet. Jack grabbed Tyrone, dragging him up. Move! They ran. The tunnels collapsed behind them, as if the planet itself was rejecting them. The pulsating walls convulsed, sealing shut like wounds closing. Then, ahead, a glimmer, an exit. They burst out into open air, tumbling onto solid ground as the cavern behind them sealed shut. Silence. Eli gasped for breath. Okay, we're alive. That's good. I like being alive. Mike groaned. I think I left a few years of my life back there. Jack forced himself up, scanning the landscape. They had emerged onto a plateau overlooking the outpost. But the structures weren't just damaged. They were transformed. Flesh had grown over metal. Buildings had merged with the terrain, their surfaces pulsating as if breathing. The entire outpost was no longer a ruin. It was becoming part of the planet. Mike's voice was hoarse. Tell me we're not seeing what I think we're seeing. Jack exhaled sharply. The planet isn't just a doomed world, he said. It's a living entity, and it's consuming everything that lands here. Tyrone wiped blood from his chin, eyes burning with realization. That's why no one came back. Jack nodded. Because once you're here, the planet doesn't let you leave. The air was thick with the stench of burning flesh and molten rock. Jack steadied his breath, pulse hammering against his skull as he scanned the twisted remains of the outpost below. The buildings, if they could even be called that anymore, had fused into the terrain, veins of pulsing red light threading through metal and stone like arteries in a diseased body. The planet wasn't just alive. It was feeding. Tyrone groaned beside him, propped up against a jagged rock, his armor shredded and blood soaking through his undersuit. So, tell me we've got a plan that's more than die slower. Mike reloaded his rifle with a humorless chuckle. I was going to suggest punch it in the face, but I think our boy already tried that back in the belly of the beast. Eli wiped sweat from his brow, his hands still trembling. There's got to be a way off this rock. There's always a way. Jack tightened his grip on his rifle. We get to the core. The mission hasn't changed. Mike scoffed. Mission? Jack, I don't know if you noticed, but we're in a damn horror movie. That thing inside the planet is rewriting physics as we know it. Tyrone gritted his teeth. If we don't stop this now, there's no leaving. There's no next team. This thing gets off-world. It won't stop at one colony. It won't stop at one system. Jack exhaled sharply. Tyrone was right. The Dominion power core they'd been sent to retrieve was still somewhere deep in that thing, embedded in whatever horrific transformation had overtaken the base. That core had been meant to supply enough energy to terraform entire planets. If the entity below had absorbed it, then we blow it, Jack said. Silence. Eli blinked. I like half of that plan, the blowing it up part, the being anywhere near it when it happens part. Less so. Jack looked at Tyrone. Can you rig an overload? Tyrone coughed, wincing. You're asking me if I can turn the most powerful power core in the galaxy into a self-destruct bomb? Hell yeah, I can. If we get to it. Mike sighed, rubbing his face. All right, one last suicide run. Let's make it count. They moved fast, weaving through the ruins as the landscape shifted around them. The ground breathed, patches of exposed muscle contracting with each step. The deeper they went, the more the structures bled into flesh, doors melting into gaping wounds, windows morphing into watching eyes. Then the voices began, not spoken, injected. "You cannot leave." Jack clenched his teeth as the skull throbbed with the sheer weight of the entity's will. It was in their minds again, not just speaking but pressing down on them, its consciousness vast, endless. Tyrone stumbled, pressing his palms to his temples. "Get out of my head. You are mine now." Jack grabbed Tyrone by the arm, dragging him forward. "Ignore it. Focus." Mike fired into the darkness ahead. "Hell with that. If it's listening, let's give it something to hear." A howl erupted from the depths of the base, long and guttural, wrong. The ground split apart, and the things from the tunnel spilled forth. They weren't just creatures. They were people, or at least they had been. Former soldiers, twisted beyond recognition, their armor fused into sinewy black flesh. Hollow sockets where eyes had been, their mouths stretched too wide in silent screams. Clawed fingers twitched involuntarily, as if their bodies were moving against their will. Eli cursed. "Jesus Christ." Tyrone steadied himself, raising his rifle. "They're already gone." Jack didn't hesitate. "Light 'em up." Gunfire roared through the corridors as they tore through the horde. The creatures moved with unnatural speed, their bodies bending at impossible angles, snapping forward with grotesque precision. The air filled with the stench of burning flesh as bullets ripped through corrupted muscle. But for every one that fell, more came. Eli swung his knife, severing a sinewy arm as a creature lunged at him. It didn't scream. It didn't react at all. It simply kept coming, its movements jerky and wrong, like a puppet on invisible strings. Tyrone threw a grenade. The explosion ripped the corridor apart, sending pieces of the transformed soldiers flying. But it only bought them a few seconds. "Move!" Jack barked. They sprinted deeper, toward the reactor chamber. The power core's containment field still hummed in the distance, its glow the only remnant of the base's original purpose. But the chamber was changing. The core was no longer just a machine. It had been assimilated, its frame pulsing with veins of blackened flesh. The energy surging from it fed directly into the planet itself. Mike cursed. "That thing is using the core like a damn heart." Tyrone ran to the terminal, fingers flying over the interface. "I can override the safeties, force a meltdown, but once I start the countdown, we got 5 minutes max." Eli turned. "We are not going to clear minimum safe distance in 5 minutes." Jack reloaded. "Then we better not waste time arguing." Tyrone took a breath. "Starting override now." The reactor screamed. A shockwave ripped through the base, and suddenly, the ground roared back. The wall split open, revealing a maw. It wasn't just a tunnel. It wasn't just a chamber. The entire base had become a part of it. The entity rose. A titanic mass of writhing tendrils, obsidian-black limbs stretching beyond sight, its many mouths unfolding like blooming flowers of endless teeth. "You belong to me?" Jack gritted his teeth. Tyrone's fingers blurred over the controls. "Almost there, just gotta." A tendril snapped forward, impaling the console. Sparks erupted, and Tyrone was thrown back, landing hard. The reactor stuttered. The countdown froze. Eli turned, panic in his voice. "Tell me it's still armed." Tyrone coughed, blood trickling from his lip. "It's stuck. Cores locked in failsafe." Mike's expression darkened. "Then somebody's got to set it off manually." Jack's stomach clenched. There was no time, no argument to be made. They all knew what had to be done. Tyrone forced himself up, gritting his teeth through the pain. "I got it." Eli's eyes widened. "No, man, we can." Tyrone gave a weak smirk. "You guys suck at bomb work." Mike clenched his jaw. "Tyrone, go." Jack hesitated a fraction of a second, then grabbed Eli and pulled him toward the exit. The entity lunged. Tyrone fired into the beast, buying them seconds. They ran. Behind him, Tyrone turned back to the console, cracked his knuckles, and took a breath. All right, you eldritch piece of trash. Let's see how you like a manual override. He ripped out the fail-safe key and jammed it into the emergency release. The reactor surged. Jack, Eli, and Mike exploded out of the base, sprinting across the ruined landscape. The entity screamed. Then, the world erupted. The shockwave tore through the sky, splitting the land apart. The mountain-sized horror writhed in agony as its stolen energy turned against it, imploding from within. The base was swallowed in fire. And then, silence. Jack coughed, staring at the smoldering crater where the outpost had been. Mike swallowed hard. Did we just... Eli dropped to his knees. Yeah, the planet beneath them stilled. The corruption was gone. Jack took a slow breath. Let's go home.